Coffee with the Editor is proudly brought to you by IRZ and the Railway Safety Regulator, RSR.
So Jamie, thank you for joining me for Coffee with the Editor. It's nice to be at your office and not in our usual coffee shop. You released, I think it was last week, a press release with regards to opening South Africa's rail network. Just contextualise your thoughts behind that.
Thanks, Philippa. It's great to have you here. So our response, our press release is really a response to the discussion document that the National Treasury released. And included in that suite of proposals was a proposal that private operators are allowed access to the core network in South Africa. And it also follows on from the national the draft white paper into national rail policy, which also calls for private operators having access to the core network. And the reason we felt it necessary to put out is that there are a huge number of stakeholders in our industry. And for those stakeholders, and it's important that those stakeholders understand that if government does roll out this policy, firstly, there's a company in the form of Traxtion that is hugely supportive of what government wants to do. And secondly, if government does roll it out, that we would respond with significant investment into the sector. And we felt that if we didn't add our voice to those that are talking about the policy proposals of government, that there would be a risk that it's a policy that government doesn't see the benefit of actually implementing.
So I think some of the standout points for me would be really what the impacts of opening the network would be. And you've mentioned some things like unlocking job creation, stimulating economic growth. You highlighted specific sectors such as agricultural, heavy industry and mining. I mean, what is your thoughts on that?
So, our primary thought on that is that we spend a lot of time in the rail industry talking about how many jobs we create in the rail industry. But really, we are part of a nation's infrastructure matrix. And a nation's infrastructure exists to make that country internationally competitive. And when countries are internationally competitive, their economies thrive, and those economies create jobs. So while there is a clear benefit of this policy in creating direct jobs in the rail industry, the really, really exciting opportunity that we see for South Africa through this policy is unlocking upstream job creation opportunities, and in a really quick time period, we think, unlocking potential economic growth at a time when our country desperately needs it.
So you mentioned a couple of things like smelters, and would that enable us to put down new industry and develop and expand some of the industrial capacity that we do have?
Yes, absolutely, and that's the sort of fundamental reason why countries invest in infrastructure. And South Africa is in an amazingly privileged position. Okay, we've got about 36,000 kilometers of installed rail track. Transnet on their own have about 23,000 route kilometers. To replace our rail network from scratch today, we think would cost about 1.5 trillion rand. But we don't have to incur that expense because we've got it installed already. Kenya have just spent $3.2 billion on a 458-kilometer railway line. Now, why did Kenya invest that money? Because they want to unlock the competitiveness of their economy through a highly efficient logistics solution between Nairobi and their main port of Mombasa. In South Africa, we have it installed already. But that network has excess capacity, and that excess capacity is lying latent in the network. And where you've got latent capacity, that is a revenue generating opportunity for that infrastructure owner. It's a little bit like building a toll road and then only letting certain people drive on the toll road and not others. You're leaving opportunities out there available where you could be creating toll fees. So we see this as an opportunity, because that is not 1.5 trillion rand that our government needs to go and spend. It's an opportunity that is already there, that it can be turned on very quickly. And that for us is the truly exciting aspect of this regulatory change that government is looking at rolling out.
So from a Transnet perspective, I mean, I don't really see this having an adverse impact opening the network. I think it would be profitable for them.
That's exactly right. And we feel that Transnet have somewhat unfairly taken quite a lot of pressure from from government and from South Africans for not utilizing all the capacity in our network. But the bottom line is that we don't think there's any company in the world that would be able to take up the extent of the capacity in our network. Transnet is doing some amazing things, but there comes a point where every company runs out of its ability to raise the capital to continue to expand. Capital investment is funded by equity, by debt, and by cash generated from your operations, and that has a ceiling for all companies. And where the only company with access to our core network doesn't have the capacity to continue to expand, to take up all of the opportunities that there are to move freight in the country, well, then it becomes, we think, a no-brainer to open that capacity up to third-party, competent and safe operators. And when you do that, when the volumes that we're targeting are purely incremental to Transnet, and that is exactly what the case would be, 100% incremental to the existing volumes that are running, then you generate access fees for them and you bring volumes back to the rail industry.
So what makes up that volume? We've been talking road to rail and how much of the traffic we are or are not moving, containerized traffic certainly, are or are not moving on the rail. I mean, where would a company like Traxtion or any other private operator find that volume?
We think that there are opportunities to bring volumes to rail across the industry. Okay, so you rightly raised the containerized freight that has where road has a huge dominance in South Africa, and we certainly believe that there is an opportunity there. We believe that there's a huge opportunity in agriculture to bring those volumes to rail. We believe that there's a big opportunity in heavy industries to bring those volumes to rail as well. And then, of course, in the mining sector, there's opportunities as well. And we do not see any opportunities to bring additional capacity at the moment to the coal and iron ore sectors, for example. Those sectors are extremely well serviced by Transnet, where they are doing some really amazing stuff. But we see the opportunities outside of those sectors. We also see the opportunities in mining in potentially unlocking new mining opportunities that to date haven't been exploited. So we really do see the opportunities to bring volumes from road to rail and across the economy. One of the opportunities that is often mentioned is the branch lines. There are certainly opportunities in the branch lines, but the issue with the branch lines is that in order to bring rail logistics solutions to the branch lines, those trains do need to run, we believe, to the ultimate destination, which means that branch line operator would also need access to the core network. There is a huge opportunity across a number of sectors to bring volumes onto the network and take up some of that latent capacity that does sit in our network.
Mining opportunities, and that would obviously be like internal mining operations, and then connecting that mine to the core network. And some of that would be like a 200 kilometer line, and some of that could be a 50 kilometer line. In a monetary term, what are the opportunities that we're losing by not unlocking those mines?
So I guess that's the $1 million question, and nobody really knows what economic growth has been hindered in the past by not being able to take up the full capacity that our rail network has available. So it's a very difficult answer to give you. All that we do know is that if you look at the size of the South African economy versus the size of the economies in many other African countries, and you look at the extent to which South Africa has a huge thriving network. Transnet moving 220 million tonnes is a massive railway, one of the world's biggest and most successful railways. Okay, it talks to a big economy that we have in South Africa, and on the outskirts of that, we have absolutely no doubt that there are significant opportunities to bring volumes off our roads onto the railway, particularly in areas that are perfectly suited to rail, and in areas where in the rest of the world those volumes move on the railways.
So you've raised that it's part of National Treasury's discussion document, it's in the draft white paper for transport. Why do you think Transnet hasn't quite taken the leap yet?
I don't think they've had any regulatory direction from government on this in the past. What the draft white paper international road policy is calling for is the vertical separation between infrastructure and operations. And we do think that follows from international best practice, and we do think that ultimately it's the right way to go. The only issue that we see with that is it's going to be complex and it's going to be very time consuming to separate the infrastructure out of a consolidated rail operation, which is Transnet at the moment. So we do see that to be a timely, something that's going to take some time. On the other hand, our understanding is that Transnet does have the ability at the moment to sign access agreements under their existing rail safety regulator permit and to bring operators onto the core network. So we do think that the opportunity here is a two-phased opportunity. The first opportunity would be to enter into access agreements together with Transnet, who would be infrastructure owner and operator, and operate complementary to Transnet, bringing volumes in addition to the volumes that they have now. And then in future, once the infrastructure owner has been set up, much like Network Rail in the United Kingdom, that we would then have an infrastructure owner, with Transnet being certainly the most dominant operator in the network, or the biggest operator in the country, but having various other operators operating alongside Transnet in future.
That would also require everything to be scheduled and planned.
Absolutely, but again there, we have a huge amount of confidence in Transnet's ability to actually roll this out. Transnet run an integrated management system, so they have ISO certification across their network, as far as I understand it, for example. Their safety standards are extremely high. So when you look at the capabilities within Transnet, they're really strong. The quality of the network itself, the actual track conditions, are really good. Certainly in comparison to what you find in the region in certain areas. So there's a number of reasons why we believe that it should be something that can be achieved and something that can be really, really successful.
You brought up the rail safety regulator. What role would they fulfill? Obviously, their role is safety, but would there be a broader aspect to their role now if we open the network?
So my understanding is that Transnet would sign access. Transnet are in their right to sign access agreements under their existing safety permit. So it would be up to Transnet then to regulate how those private operators operate under their permit. Okay, so it wouldn't necessarily require the rail safety regulator to provide permits to the private operators that are looking to enter the network. Those private operators would operate under Transnet's permit. Now, to be very clear, this is our understanding of the existing situation. In future, once we have a state-owned enterprise that is responsible as the infrastructure owner, well then, at that stage, when you have a number of operators operating under on that network on behalf of that state-owned company, then Transnet would require a permit, and hopefully companies like ourselves at that stage would require our permits on our own. At the moment, our understanding of the regulation, and we obviously have looked into it, is that we would operate under Transnet's permit.
Open access networks, they do exist in Africa, some quite successfully.
Yes, so if you look at a number of our regional partner countries, they are going into those in this direction. Mozambique, Zambia, and Tanzania, for example, have already implemented third-party operators onto the network with enormous success. And there have been incremental jumps in the extent to which rail volumes are moved in those countries. So, the fact that our government has decided to follow a policy network that follows not only international best practice, but follows what our regional partners are doing, is also really encouraging. Of course, what it also means is that it enhances the interconnectivity between South Africa and our regional trading partners. Now, one of the biggest frustrations of industry in South Africa is the high cost of logistics of getting our manufactured goods into the region. Highly efficient rail networks that are operating into the region can surely only be positive for South African industry and manufacturing as we attempt to get our goods into the region in a highly efficient manner. In President Ramaphosa's weekly newsletter that he released this morning, he talks exactly about that same thing, about South Africa's future lies in trading with the continent. And that's absolutely right. In order to do that, we need a highly efficient logistics network to get our parts and our industry to be successful in the region. And we think that an interconnected rail system with operators that can operate across the network makes a huge amount of sense. And that's obviously where it's going if we have an open access arrangement across the region.
So Traxtion, you've got rolling stock, you've got a projects section, you have money. Let's say we signed it off today, what would you be doing tomorrow?
So, I guess everything that we've done in many ways is get ourselves to be able to become a significant rail operator in the region. Our leasing company has huge funding capacity because of the nature of our institutional shareholders. We have 32 years of experience in operations. We have ISO certification ourselves, and the equivalent of NOSO 5-star safety ratings, etc. So, we believe that there are a couple of things needed in order to be able to make a company successful under a policy like this. The first is you need to be competent and safe. And we do think that we have the capabilities, the capacity to be able to make a significant investment in the sector from that direction in terms of, are we a competent and safe operator? Yes, I really think we are. The next question is, do you have the funding capacity to bring the huge investments that are needed in order to make a real difference? Because each locomotive costs $3.5 million to $4 million. Each wagon costs somewhere between $60,000 and $120,000. So in order to make a significant difference, you need to have a huge access to capital. A company that has the ability to put on one or two train sets is not going to make this policy really make sense. It has to be operators with the ability to bring significant investments in the sector. And we do think that is where we can respond, is that we have, thankfully, significant access to capital.